She stood on the wooden auction platform, motionless as the desert winds swirled dust around her bare feet. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, her hair tangled from days of sun and sand. The auctioneer's voice carried across the small crowd gathered in the dusty frontier town. "Whoever buys this ranch," he shouted, slamming his hat against his thigh, "gets the servant free." Laughter rippled through the men, a harsh, thoughtless sound that made her flinch but not look up. She kept her eyes low, fixed on the cracked boards beneath her, as if she could vanish into them. Luke Harding stood near the back, hat shadowing his eyes. He hadn't come for a servant. He'd come for the ranch, a quiet piece of land on the edge of the territory, where he could start over after the war took everything from him. But when the auctioneer gestured to the girl like she was another piece of furniture, something in Luke's chest twisted. She was small, maybe 18, with skin browned by the sun and a look that was neither defiant nor broken, just distant, as if her mind was 1,000 miles away. "Half-blood Apache," someone muttered beside him. "Taken in during the raids last spring." The words made Luke's jaw tighten. He knew how the townsfolk treated those caught between two worlds. To them, she was neither white nor Apache, just property with no place to belong. The auctioneer slammed the final gavel. "Sold to Mr. Harding." The crowd cheered, and Luke felt the weight of their stares. When he approached her, she didn't move, didn't even breathe, it seemed. "You'll ride with me," he said quietly. She nodded once, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." Her tone was flat, practiced, like she'd said those words too many times before. They rode back in silence under a bleeding sunset, the sky burning red behind the hills. Luke tried not to look at her, but the question gnawed at him. What had this girl seen, and why did her eyes look like they'd forgotten how to hope? The wind carried her quiet humming, a tune older than the land itself. That night, as Luke stood outside the ranch house watching the stars rise, he heard her whisper in Apache, soft, sorrowful words carried by the wind. He didn't understand them, but the tone chilled him. Somewhere in the dark hills a wolf howled and she froze. Luke realized then, this girl wasn't meant to serve. She was waiting for something, or someone. The next morning, the ranch was quiet except for the creak of the windmill and the soft clang of buckets. She was already awake, sweeping the porch as if she'd been doing it her whole life. Luke offered her coffee, but she shook her head without meeting his eyes. "Don't need it," she said softly. Her voice carried an accent that wasn't quite Apache, not quite English, a sound of two worlds that never fit together. Days turned into weeks. She never complained, never rested, but Luke noticed how she would stop, working at sunset, and stare at the far hills. The same direction every time. He'd find her outside long after dark, listening to the wind. Once he asked, "What's out there?" She didn't answer, only whispered, "Home." The word hit him harder than he expected. He'd bought her freedom, yet she was still trapped, not by him, but by the invisible ties of loss. One evening, while fixing the corral fence, Luke found a small bundle hidden beneath a loose plank, a carved wooden feather, wrapped in deer hide. It wasn't just decoration. It was a symbol, Apache-made, likely sacred. When he showed it to her, she went pale. "Where did you find this?" she asked sharply. "Here, under the fence," he replied. She snatched it from his hand, clutching it like life itself. "It was my brother's," she whispered. "He died, or so they told me." That night, the wind carried strange sounds through the valley, distant drums, or maybe thunder. Luke stepped out onto the porch and saw her standing barefoot in the cold dirt, looking toward the ridge. "They're coming," she said quietly. He frowned. "Who's coming?" She turned to him, her face pale in the moonlight. "The ones who never forgot me." Before dawn, the horses grew restless, snorting and pacing in their stalls. Luke grabbed his rifle. She stopped him with a hand on his arm, her first touch since she'd arrived. "Don't," she whispered. "If you fight them, they'll kill you." His pulse quickened as hoofbeats echoed through the valley. Dozens of riders emerged from the mist, painted faces, burning torches, eyes that held centuries of grief. She stepped forward, trembling. "My brother. He's with them." The warriors halted in front of the ranch, their horses pawing at the dirt, breath steaming in the cold dawn air. At their head rode a tall apache with braids streaked with grey and eyes that burned like embers. He dismounted slowly, scanning the yard, then fixed his gaze on the girl. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then he spoke one word that shattered the silence. "Sister." Her knees gave way as tears filled her eyes. Luke stood frozen, his rifle half raised, unable to breathe. She whispered his name, "Taza," before rushing to him. The warrior caught her in his arms, closing them around her like a father might hold a child lost to time. The others watched in silence, as if witnessing something sacred. "We buried you," Taza murmured, voice rough. "We thought the soldiers took your life." She shook her head. "They took everything but that." Her voice cracked. As she touched the scar on her wrist, Taza looked to Luke, his expression unreadable. "You treated her fair." The question wasn't just about kindness. It was a test of honor. Luke nodded slowly. "She's worked my land, but I never owned her." The warrior's eyes softened. "Then you are not our enemy." He gestured for his men to lower their weapons. The tension broke like a storm passing. They shared food that morning. Bread, dried meat, black coffee. Luke sat beside the fire, listening to the strange mix of English and Apache as siblings reunited. The girl laughed for the first time, a sound fragile but alive. Taza placed his hand over hers. "You can come home now," he said. She looked toward Luke, torn. "I owe him," but Luke shook his head. "No, you don't owe me a thing. You were never mine." Before leaving, Taza handed Luke the carved feather she had once hidden. "Keep this," he said, "a sign of peace." Then he turned his horse toward the mountains, the warriors following in silence. The girl looked back one last time, her eyes soft with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. When they were gone, Luke stood alone in the yard, the wind tugging at his coat. He opened his hand, staring at the feather glinting in the sunlight. The ranch felt different now, lighter, freer, as if the land itself had forgiven something. Somewhere in the hills a hawk cried, and Luke smiled faintly. She was gone, but never lost.